On September 27, 1821, a ragtag army of liberators entered the city of Mexico. 3 centuries of colonial rule had ended. Now Mexico was free, fragile, and full of possibility. Independence had been hard-won, its promises resonant, but also its peril. Independence had united unlikely allies, conservative monarchists around Agustin de Iturbide, and Republican reformers like Vicente Guerrero. But once Spain was defeated, that unity split. In 1822, Iturbide crowned himself emperor, dissolved Congress, and tried to rule by decree. Army leaders and Republicans rose against him. The empire collapsed, and the First Mexican Republic took its first unsteady steps. It was a beginning, not a finish line. With political instability came economic uncertainty, and then war, the Texas Revolution. Northern Mexico was a distant imperial frontier. Vast lands inherited from the Spanish Empire, California, New Mexico, Texas, but few settlers and fragile institutions. Immigration from the United States surged into Texas. Tensions hardened. In 1836, the territory broke away. Santa Anna crushed the Alamo after a brutal siege, but the defeat became a battle cry. Weeks later, at San Jacinto, he was captured. Mexican control over Texas unraveled. A bitter border question began to burn. When the United States annexed Texas in 1845, disputes on the Rio Grande flared into war. U.S. troops seized New Mexico and California. A second front landed at Veracruz and marched inland. Mexico fought hard, from Palo Alto and Buena Vista to the heights of Chapultepec. But Mexico City fell in 1847. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo redrew the map, ceding the north and setting a new border. The loss cut deep, wounding pride and treasury alike, yet forcing a reckoning. What kind of republic would Mexico be? Out of defeat came reform. Liberal leaders pressed to separate church and state, end special military and clerical privileges, expand civil rights, and modernize justice. The 1824 Constitution established a federal system and equality before the law. And by 1829, slavery was abolished nationwide. Ideas clashed with realities. Power swung between federalists and centralists. Budgets were empty. Regional caudillos filled the void. And no one embodied the turbulence of the era more than Antonio de Santa Anna. Charismatic, brilliant, and polarizing, he returned to power again and again as if caught in the nation's own storm. So when, in 1856, conservatives rebelled against liberal reforms, Santa Anna switched sides, making a precarious bargain with French Emperor Napoleon III. That gamble ignited the Second French Intervention in Mexico. In 1862, on May 5th, Mexican forces stunned Europe by stopping the invaders at the Battle of Puebla, a victory still celebrated for its defiance. Yet the empire pressed on. Archduke Maximilian was installed as Mexico's emperor. President Benito kept the Republican government alive from the north, waiting out the empire as international winds shifted. When French troops withdrew, the monarchy collapsed. Maximilian was captured and executed, and the republic, battered but unbroken, turned to rebuilding. Railways stitched regions together, telegraphs shrank distance. Tariffs and the metric system modernized trade. The separation of church and state became firm reality. He died in office in 1872. A secular republicanism. The work he began would be taken in a new and harsher direction by a general who promised order above all. Porfirio seized power in 1876 and ruled for decades under the banner of order and progress, backed by a circle of technocrats known as the country industrialized. Railroads multiplied, mines expanded, electricity and oil signaled modernity. Wealth grew, but so did inequality. Elections were managed, dissent was met with pan o palo, carrot or stick. Progress arrived in shining stations and glowing city lights, while many campesinos saw longer hours, lost lands and closed doors. And across the southeast, the Maya lived another side of this story. Beginning in 1847, Maya communities rose in the caste war of Yucatan against regional elites and debt peonage. For decades, they defended an autonomous world centered at Chan Santa Cruz, guided by prophecy and hard-won self. Even as haciendas boomed and pulled fiber to global markets, Maya villages guarded language, ritual, and land. Their resilience outlasted wars and fashions of power. By 1910, Diaz's promise to restore democracy rang hollow. Francisco I. Madero called for revolt, igniting a nationwide uprising. The Porfirian regime crumbled, but the aftershock was chaos. Madero was murdered in a coup led by Victoriano Huerta. Foreign intervention deepened the crisis, and revolutionary factions under Emiliano Pancho Villa and Venustiano Carranza fought, fractured, and reformed the nation in fire. The cost was immense, the transformation permanent. In 1917, a new constitution set foundations unlike any in the hemisphere. Article 27 asserted the nation's ownership of land and subsoil, opening the door to agrarian reform and resource sovereignty. Article 123 protected labor with the 8-hour day and the right to organize. Secular public education expanded. The bullets slowly quieted, replaced by ballots and bargaining. The revolution's ideals moved from trenches to institutions. Ala Obregon's victory ended large-scale fighting and began the long project of building a state that could contain revolution without losing its energy. A new party system, ancestor of today's PRI, channeled conflict into politics. On public walls, muralists like Diego Rivera, José Clemente Orozco, and David Alfaro Sequeiros painted a people's history. Conquest and corn, miners and teachers, heroes and warnings. In 1938, President Lázaro Cárdenas nationalized oil, a thunderclap of sovereignty that echoed from refineries to village assemblies. The 1940s found Mexico on a new global stage. World War II pulled Mexico into a wider orbit. After U-boats sank its tankers, Mexico declared war and sent Squadron 201 to fly in the Pacific. At home, wartime demand accelerated factories and drew workers to cities. Post-war decades brought highways and dams, classrooms and clinics, rising literacy and, in time, women's suffrage. A new urban nation was taking shape, confident, complicated, and interdependent. For years, the PRI dominated national politics, promising stability and growth. Stability, however, carried a cost. In 1968, the Tlatelolco massacre scarred the national conscience. In 1982, a debt crisis shattered economic illusions. In 1985, a devastating earthquake exposed the state's limits. Out of rubble, civil society found its voice. Neighbors organizing, students leading, citizens demanding an accountable future. The 1990s reshaped the economy through market reforms and a continental trade pact. On the day NAFTA took effect in 1994, the Zapatista uprising in Maya-majority Chiapas declared that development without dignity would not stand. Community assemblies, woven hoop piles and cornfields became political texts, insisting that indigenous rights and local voices belong at the center of the national conversation, not its margins. In 2000, a peaceful alternation of power in the presidency ended a 71-year run for one party and marked democratic maturity. The new century arrived with familiar challenges: security, inequality, migration, and new possibilities. Organized crime tested institutions. Remittances from migrants sustained families. The country wrestled with brain drain, even as entrepreneurs, artists, and scientists built futures at home. The story remained complex, and so did the people telling it. Today, Mexico is one of the world's most populous nations and among its larger economies, woven tightly into global supply chains and regional culture. Archaeologists continue to reveal cities and stories that were ancient when conquistadors were children. Indigenous identification has risen as more Mexicans claim the languages and lineages that power refused to see. In classrooms from Merida to San Cristobal, Maya words meet modern code. On plazas and screens, old rhythms score new debates. From empire to republic, from occupation to revolution, from murals to modern skylines, Mexico's path is not a straight road, but a gear that catches, slips, and then turns. Through it all runs the thread of communities that remember who they are, Maya among them, making the nation not just newer, but deeper. If this story helped you see that journey more clearly, stay with us for the next chapter and subscribe for more timeless histories told for today. See you soon.